It was nighttime, and I had just experienced an unexpected and intense encounter with a man I barely knew. I'm not a shallow woman. I did it because I was broken inside. My boyfriend, who I had been dating for 3 years, left me to move to England with a rich woman. Before leaving, he told me I wasn't kind, considerate, or attractive in front of his friends. I pretended to be strong, but deep down, I was shattered. To forget the pain, I went alone to a bar and drank more than usual. It was in that bar that I met that man, although the next day I could barely remember his face. Suddenly, I heard the sound of running water. He was taking a shower. I opened my eyes slowly and realized I was in a luxurious hotel room. The morning sunlight lit up the sheets, and my shoes were scattered on the floor. I adjusted the sheets and noticed my body was a bit sore, maybe from the intensity of the previous night. When I tried to move, I felt a slight discomfort. I closed my eyes, and fragments of those moments flooded my mind, bringing intense emotions. I placed my hand on my forehead, trying to piece together the confused memories rushing through my mind. I felt a mix of confusion and regret. That man had gotten so close to me, and although I didn't want to admit it, that moment had been intense. But it wasn't the time to think about that. I had never been in a situation like this with a stranger, and I didn't know how to handle it. I decided to escape before he came out of the bathroom, so I got dressed quickly, grabbed my purse, and quietly headed to the door. However, before I could leave, the bathroom door opened, and a stunningly attractive man appeared. He had thick, golden hair and a face that could captivate anyone. Through the slightly open bathrobe, I could see his athletic build. My heart started racing, and my emotions spiraled out of control. This man was way more handsome than my ex. Suddenly, memories from the night before flooded my mind. His passionate embraces, his intense kisses. Just thinking about it made my cheeks flush. I shook my head, trying to push those thoughts away, but I couldn't calm down. In contrast to my nervousness, he seemed completely calm. When I looked up, I noticed he was staring at me from head to toe, as if evaluating me. I saw the corner of his mouth curl into an expression of disdain. Why was he looking at me like that? The man walked over to the bed and grabbed his wallet. Inside was a thick wad of bills. What did that mean? Was he trying to pay me for what happened between us? He was treating me like I was just some... I felt deeply offended and decided to hit back. Without thinking twice, I pulled out the $150 I had in my purse and threw it on the bed. Before he could give me his money, I crossed my arms and, with fake calm, said, "Even though you're handsome, last night wasn't as memorable as you think. This is what you're worth to me." I said it so he wouldn't realize I didn't have much money. "What did you say?" he asked, his voice full of anger. There was no turning back. No matter how embarrassed I was, I had to keep my composure. To make my performance more convincing, I walked up to him and gave him a few pats on the shoulder. "Maybe you should improve a bit," I said seriously. "Once you've got more experience, you'll be able to charge more." After that, I turned around and walked out of the room as fast as I could. As I ran, I heard the man cursing loudly. I had clearly made him furious. I didn't dare stop and only walked faster. If he tried to stop me, I knew I wouldn't be able to resist. Fortunately, he didn't follow me. When I left the hotel, I was still trembling with nerves. I placed my hand on my chest, grateful for getting away so quickly. I didn't want anything to do with that man ever again. I didn't know his name or where he lived, and that gave me some peace of mind. After breakfast, I decided to go to the office. On the way, I got a call from my mother. "Carla, sweetheart, today is your Uncle Marcos's 60th birthday. We're celebrating it with a dinner at the hotel with Raphael. You have to come." "No, Mom, I don't want to go," I replied. I knew if I went, I'd have to see my father and my stepmother. And even though I was an adult, I still couldn't forgive my father for betraying me and my mother. "Your Uncle Marcos and Aunt Paula have always been so good to you," my mom insisted. "They were the ones who asked me to invite you." I knew my uncles had always supported me. When my father left us, I was under 10 years old. Without them, life for my mother and me would have been much harder. After thinking for a moment, I said, "Fine, I'll go." "Please don't cause any problems when you see your father," my mother pleaded. "Don't worry. Neither of us will make a scene," I assured her. Before hanging up, I remembered how my mother had knelt in front of my father, begging him not to leave us. She was willing to tolerate his cheating just so we could have a home. But my father wasn't satisfied with that. In the end, he not only divorced my mother, but also took all our money, leaving us with not a single cent and no place to live. Since then, Only my mother and I knew how much we had suffered. When I got to the office, I tried to push those bitter memories aside. I arrived just in time. I headed to my desk, where my coworker Diana walked up to me with a smile. "Hey, honey," she greeted. "Didn't you break up with your boyfriend? You look kind of sad." Diana and I had always had a good relationship, and I knew she didn't mean it in a bad way. "Last night, I spent $150 on someone to keep me company and heal my broken heart," I said. "Only that much?" Diana pursed her lips. "A man that cheap can't be very good." I knew she wasn't serious. We always joked like that, and anyone listening would think we were super liberal. But in reality, we were quite conservative. Even if I had told her I slept with someone, she'd assume I was joking. I decided not to explain any further, and just laughed. "By the way," Diana said, changing the subject, "I just heard the company has a new boss." "I'm just an assistant," I replied. "I don't care who the new boss is." But she continued, "I heard he's the heir of the Whitmore Group. His father's a top government official and his mother's the president of the headquarters. And he's young and good-looking. All the women in the company are dying to see if the rumors are true." "Sounds like someone way out of reach," I said calmly. "I doubt any of us could even get close." At that moment, my supervisor, Fernando, approached us. "The new boss is taking over," he said seriously. "Everyone above department manager level must attend the introduction meeting in the conference room." I grabbed my notebook and pen and followed him. Diana winked at me, asking me to snap a photo of the new boss. But as soon as I walked into the conference room, I saw it was packed. Since I was just an assistant, I sat in a corner. Honestly, I wasn't interested in the new boss at that moment. I could only think about the man from that morning. I remembered the look on his face when I threw the $150, and I couldn't help but smile. Looking back, maybe I had gone too far. But he looked at me with such disdain. And he took out his wallet like he was going to pay me. I just returned the favor. Suddenly, the sound of applause snapped me out of my thoughts. A handsome man in a black suit entered the conference room, surrounded by people. I stared at his face for several seconds, unable to believe what I was seeing. Why was he here? I rubbed my eyes, thinking something was wrong with my vision. When I opened them again, I realized the new boss was the man I had spent the night with. I had spent $150 on him, and now he was my boss. Oh my God. My heart pounded in my chest, and all I could think was, what am I going to do now? When he walked into the conference room, surrounded by directors and managers, everything inside me froze. For a few seconds, even the air felt heavy. I didn't know his name, didn't know where he lived, and that had given me some sense of relief. But now he was right there, in front of me, my new boss. I tried to make myself as small as possible in the corner of the room, lowering my shoulders and keeping my eyes glued to my notebook, pretending to take notes. But inside, I was spiraling. The memories from the night before hit me harder than I wanted to admit. Not just the kisses and touches, but the exact moment I threw the money on the bed, trying to salvage some dignity after feeling humiliated.
And now, how was I supposed to look him in the eye?
But the most unexpected thing happened. "Good morning, everyone," he said, his voice firm and confident. It was the same voice that had whispered in my ear just hours ago, but now it carried the weight of a leader, not a one-night stand. "It's an honor to be here. I'm looking forward to working with all of you and taking this company even further." Applause filled the room. I clapped slowly, still in shock. He spoke like nothing had happened. Like I was just another employee. Like we hadn't spent the night together. Like I hadn't thrown $150 in his face. He scanned the room, offering polite nods and smiles to each group of employees watching him with admiration. My heart raced when he looked in my direction. For a brief second, our eyes met. My breath caught. But what I saw in his gaze shocked me even more. Nothing. No trace of anger, mockery, or even recognition. Just a respectful nod.
Cold.
Professional. I didn't know whether to feel relieved or even more panicked. After the presentation, we all returned to our departments. I tried to walk fast, nearly tripping over my own feet, desperate to avoid him. But as I reached my desk, I heard footsteps approaching. "You're Carla, right?" My whole body went cold. It was him, right behind me. I turned slowly, trying not to show the panic crawling under my skin. "Yes, sir," I replied weakly. "I'm the new CEO, but I guess you already know that," he said with a polite smile, extending his hand like last night never happened. "I'm trying to meet the team. I hope we'll work well together." I shook his hand, my palm nearly sweating through my skin. and nodded slightly. My heart was pounding so hard I could barely hear myself think. He was really pretending nothing had happened. I work in admin as an assistant to management. If you need anything, I'm happy to help. I mumbled, trying to sound normal, though I knew my voice trembled. Great. I'm glad to hear that. He replied in the same polite tone. Good work, Carla. And then he left. That was it. He just walked away. Left me standing in the middle of the hallway, feeling like the floor was about to swallow me whole. I went back to my desk in silence, feeling ridiculous. How could he act like that? Had that night meant nothing at all to him? Had he done this with other women before, spending the night and then pretending they never existed? I felt stupid.
Small.
Disposable. And worst of all, now he was my direct superior. He ran everything. And me? I was just an assistant, trying to hide my shame. The morning dragged on. I couldn't focus on anything. Every step in the hallway made me flinch, terrified he'd appear again. I tried to distract myself with spreadsheets, emails, documents, but everything looped back to him. I remembered his touch, the way he looked at me when I undressed, and then the disgust. The wallet, the money. Had I been delusional? Did I really believe, even for a second, that that night meant something? That he had felt a connection? Now I understood. To him, it was nothing. And the way he acted like I was a total stranger made it even worse. At lunch, I sat with Diana, trying to hide the weight crushing my chest. She went on and on about how good-looking and charming the new boss was. Every woman in the company was already fantasizing about him. Did you see the way he walks? The way he talks? My God, Carla, he looks like a movie star. I'd marry him tomorrow, she laughed. Yeah, he's impressive, I muttered, pushing my food around without appetite. I think he looked at you during the meeting, you know, she added. Maybe he liked you. I almost choked. No way, he was just being polite. I lied, forcing a smile. But inside, I was falling apart. I knew this wasn't over. Because even if he pretended like nothing had happened, I was sure of one thing. He wasn't going to let this go. And somehow, someway, he'd make me pay for it.
Just not today.
He was playing a game I didn't know the rules to. And the worst part? A part of me still trembled just remembering him. The week went on as if nothing had happened. At least on his end.
Me?
I was living in a constant state of anxiety. I was on edge all the time. Every time I heard firm footsteps in the hallway or the elevator doors opening, my whole body would tense up. It felt like I was walking around with a rope tightening around my neck, waiting for the final pull. And of course, he was everywhere. Showing up in meetings, walking through different departments, talking to managers, smiling politely at everyone. Always calm. Always professional. That's what threw me off the most, his composure. His restraint. I couldn't read him. I didn't know what he was thinking.
And that scared me.
In my mind, I had already imagined 1,000 different scenarios. In one, he demoted me. In another, he fired me for inappropriate conduct. In the worst of them, he exposed everything to the whole office. Even if he was pretending that I didn't exist, I couldn't shake the feeling that at any moment, I'd be stabbed in the back. So, when the executive assistant approached my desk with a slight smile and said, "He'd like to see you in his office. Right now." I froze. Me? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. Yes, Carla. He specifically asked for you. It felt like a death sentence. I took a deep breath, closed my file without saving it, and walked down the hallway like someone heading to an execution. I knocked on the door lightly, holding my breath. Come in, he said from inside, his voice calm, and still unsettling for all the wrong reasons. I pushed the door open and stepped inside. He was sitting at his desk, flipping through some documents, his sleeves rolled up neatly to his elbows. He didn't even look up right away, just gestured toward the chair in front of him. Please sit. I obeyed in silence, my hands clenched tightly in my lap, eyes fixed on some random spot on the desk. My stomach was a knot of nerves. Finally, he lifted his gaze and looked at me. His face was serious, but not cold. Carla,
I wanted to speak to you.
Just the two of us. I nodded but said nothing. I've noticed you've been uncomfortable since that day. And I understand, he said, his tone surprisingly gentle. But I think it would be unfair of me not to clear things up. That caught me off guard. The last thing I expected was for him to acknowledge what had happened. About that night, he continued, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of uncertainty in his expression. I was alone at that bar. I'd had a terrible day. Personal stuff. I just wanted to forget my life for a while. And then I saw you. You were beautiful, but your eyes, you looked so sad. Like you were carrying the weight of the world. My cheeks burned. I sat frozen, unsure whether this was a trap or something else. I approached you because I genuinely just wanted to talk to someone. I wasn't expecting anything to happen. You were kind. We talked for hours. We drank. We laughed. And things happened. But he paused, meeting my eyes directly. At no point did I want to disrespect you. I never intended to treat you like you were less. The image of his wallet, the wad of bills, flashed in my head like a warning sign. He noticed the shift in my expression and added, I wasn't offering you money.
I swear.
That was to pay for the hotel. I was going to check out first and wanted everything covered so you wouldn't have to deal with anything. It wasn't what you thought. I didn't even realize how you'd taken it until you threw the money at me and stormed out. I swallowed hard. For the first time since that morning, I started to think maybe I had misunderstood everything. I was stunned, he continued. You left so fast, looked so hurt. I thought the best thing to do was respect your reaction and stay away. He was slowly dismantling the wall I had built up in my mind. I wasn't sure if I should feel relieved or ashamed. I had no idea you worked here. When I saw you at the meeting, I was just as surprised as you were. But Carla, his voice grew firmer. I have no intention of hurting you. Not professionally, not personally. I don't want you to feel uncomfortable here. And I definitely don't want revenge or to humiliate you. I looked down, my throat tight. I never imagined he'd be this direct. Or this sincere. I'm sorry, I whispered. I thought you were disgusted with me. That you saw me as someone cheap. I was so embarrassed. I thought you were going to retaliate or try to make me pay for reacting the way I did. He let out a quiet sigh and leaned forward a bit. I get it.
Really? And I don't blame you for thinking that. But now you know it wasn't like that.
I want us to be able to work together with respect. Without tension. And, if possible, without resentment. I nodded slowly, still stunned by how different this conversation was from the nightmare scenarios I had played out in my head. He wasn't just being kind, he was being honest. Open. I won't bring this up again unless you want to, he added. This is the last time I mention that night. You have every right to move on however you choose. Thank you for saying all that, I said softly. And I'm sorry again for how I reacted. He gave a faint smile, and it wasn't smug or cold. It was calm, genuine. It's okay, Carla. Sometimes, all we need is to understand each other's side. Have a good afternoon. You too, sir, I said, standing up. When I walked out of his office, the hallway didn't feel as suffocating anymore. I was still confused, still scared, but something inside me had shifted. Maybe he wasn't the monster I had built in my mind. And maybe, just maybe, the real problem was everything I still hadn't forgiven in myself. After that conversation in his office, things began to change. Not just between us, but inside me. At first, it was subtle. He looked at me differently. Or maybe, I was just allowing myself to see him differently. I kept telling myself it was nothing, that he was only being polite to avoid workplace tension. But the truth? The truth was Messier. He'd stop by my desk more often. Sometimes under the pretense of checking on reports, other times just to say something random that would make me laugh. I started noticing how easily our conversations flowed. How comfortable I felt near him. And that terrified me. I was starting to look forward to the sound of his footsteps down the hallway. And when he didn't show up, I noticed. And I hated that I noticed. I tried to stay grounded, remind myself of everything that had happened. But it was hard when he kept proving through little things that he wasn't who I thought he was. He wasn't cold. He wasn't calculating. He was attentive.
Funny, even.
One Thursday afternoon, while I was at the printer, he showed up beside me with a coffee in hand. You get so focused when you're working. Almost makes me afraid to interrupt. I smiled, half embarrassed. It's the only way I survive around here. You do more than survive. You keep this place moving. Your manager can't stop praising you. Have you been asking about me? I teased, raising an eyebrow. He shrugged, a little too casually. I like to know who actually gets things done around here. I laughed. And in that moment, he said it. Are you free tomorrow night? I froze. For a second, I just stared at him. He continued before I could say anything. Nothing fancy. Just dinner. I cook.
Wine.
Conversation. No pressure. You can even escape out the window if it gets awkward. Do you invite all your assistants to dinner? I asked, half joking, half testing. Only the ones who arch their eyebrows like that, he replied. I laughed. even though my stomach twisted. Against all logic, I said yes. Fine. But if the food's bad, I'm telling everyone in the building. Deal. Friday night, I showed up to his apartment more nervous than I wanted to admit. He answered the door in an apron, sleeves rolled up, kitchen full of amazing smells. He looked domestic. Real. Nothing like the image of the CEO I had built in my head. Dinner was surprisingly perfect. We laughed, talked about books, movies, childhood stuff. He told me how he hated formal galas and always felt like he was pretending to be someone else. I told him how I hated being called strong like it was a compliment, when in reality, it just meant no one ever checked to see if I was okay. He listened. No interruptions. No judgment. He didn't try to kiss me. He just held my hand across the table. That simple gesture did more to shake me than any night of passion ever could. And then it hit me, like a punch to the stomach. The dinner. Not this one, but the one tomorrow. The one I'd agreed to for my Uncle Marcos's birthday. The one I couldn't get out of. I pulled my hand back instinctively. He noticed. What's wrong? I shook my head quickly. Nothing. Just remembered something I have to do. Something bad? I sighed and set my wine glass down. A family dinner. My uncle's turning 60. My mom begged me to go. That doesn't sound so bad. It does when you know my family, I said, trying to laugh it off. My dad will be there. And his wife. His face changed slightly, just enough to let me know he was listening closely. I looked away and added. He left us when I was a kid. Took everything. My mom and I had nothing. No money, no home. He didn't care. And now he walks around smiling like he's some devoted father. He didn't say anything. He just waited, letting me speak. My uncles, Paula and Marcos, were the only ones who really helped us. They insisted I come. So I'm going. But I hate it. I hate pretending everything's okay. He took a breath and leaned in just a bit. You're stronger than you think. Not really, I whispered. Yes, really. You're going, even though you don't want to. That says a lot. It wasn't just what he said. It was how he said it. I felt seen. Heard. Understood. And that scared me more than anything. He didn't pressure me to stay. Just walked me to the door and gave me a hug. A slow, soft hug. No ulterior motive. Just warmth. But inside me, a storm had started. Because I was beginning to fall for him. Really fall. And tomorrow, I'd have to face the part of my past I'd tried so hard to bury. I didn't know if this thing between us would survive it. I wasn't even sure I would. The next morning, I woke up with that all too familiar weight in my chest. Today was the day of the family dinner. The one I had promised my mom I'd attend. The one I dreaded since the moment she called. I kept telling myself I was fine, that I was prepared. But every time I thought about walking into that hotel ballroom and seeing him, my father, playing the role of the perfect dad, I felt like I was being dragged into a nightmare I never fully woke up from. I tried to distract myself, pacing around the apartment, switching outfits 3 times, curling and then straightening my hair again. Nothing helped. Then my phone lit up with a voice message from him. Voice message. Hey, Carla. I've been thinking about it all night and I don't want you to go alone. If you'll let me, I'd like to go with you. No labels, no pressure. You don't even have to introduce me as anything more than a friend. But I want to support you. If you need to leave early, we leave. I'll be with you, whatever you need. I stared at the screen for a long moment, my heart racing. No one had ever offered to stand beside me like that. Not like this. No guilt, no control, no expectation. Just support. I replied. I'd really like that. Pick me up at 7. His answer came back quickly, a smiling emoji and a simple, I'll be there. When he arrived, I was already dressed. Nothing too flashy, a simple dress, subtle makeup, but the tension in my shoulders was impossible to hide. He looked at me for a second, really looked at me, and said, You look beautiful. I gave him a small smile. It wasn't vanity, I felt it was relief. Gratitude. Let's go, I said softly. The dinner was held at an elegant hotel ballroom. Everything looked perfect. Polished. Pretentious. Too many people acting too impressed with themselves. But none of it bothered me as much as him, my father. He was smiling and chatting like he hadn't blown our lives to pieces. Like he hadn't abandoned my mother and me without a cent. And my stepmother? Dressed like royalty, greeting everyone as if she had been born into the family. But then I glanced to my side, and he was there. Calm. Steady. He met my eyes and gave me a slight nod. A silent I've got you. My Aunt Paula and Uncle Marcos came to greet me with open arms, just like they always had. The only real affection I ever knew in that family. And when they saw him beside me, their curiosity was obvious, but not judgmental. "And this is?" my aunt asked, raising an eyebrow with a half smile. "A friend," I said quickly. He extended his hand, polite and composed. "It's a pleasure. I just came to keep Carla company. I know how important this night is." My uncle gave him a firm handshake and chuckled.
Good.
"I'm glad she's not going through it alone. She's got this habit of trying to carry the world by herself. It's exhausting." I nodded, feeling my throat tighten. My uncles always understood more than I gave them credit for. Throughout the evening, he stayed by my side. When my father tried to approach me, flashing his fake little smile, he subtly stepped between us, not aggressive, but firm. Just enough to set a boundary. Just enough to let me breathe.
He didn't speak for me.
He didn't take control.
He just stood with me.
When the dinner ended, we left before things could get uncomfortable. As we walked to the car, we stayed silent for a while. Once we got in and closed the doors, he turned to me. "Can I ask you something?" "Sure," I said, already knowing where this was going. "That night at the bar. Why were you there alone?" I looked out the window for a moment, then closed my eyes and exhaled. Because my ex dumped me in the most humiliating way possible. 3 years together, and he ended it over text. Said he was moving to England with some rich woman. Said I wasn't interesting enough. That I wasn't the type people liked. That his friends pitted him for dating me. I laughed bitterly. I felt like trash. So I went to the bar alone. I didn't know what else to do with all that pain. There was a pause. And then, to my surprise, he said, "Is her name Lorena?" I blinked, turned toward him, stunned. How do you know that?" He gave a small, dry laugh. "I know her. Very well, actually. My dad nearly lost everything because of her. She targets wealthy men. Makes them feel invincible. Then, once she's sucked everything out of them, money, influence, even reputation, she moves on to the next one." I sat there, stunned. "You're telling me she's going to leave him too?" "She already is. He probably hasn't figured it out yet, but I'd bet anything she's already meeting someone else. That's her pattern. Always." I shook my head, trying to process it all. But he wasn't finished. "I have an idea. If you want, we can make sure your ex knows exactly what he gave up. Not just knows, feels it. But only if you want it." My heart thudded in my chest. It wasn't about revenge. It wasn't even about him anymore.
It was about me.
About taking back the power I let others take for so long. I looked at him, his calm, serious face, and I knew. He wasn't playing games. He wasn't offering petty payback. He was offering me a chance to reclaim my story. "I want to hear it," I said softly. He smiled. "Then let's talk." And in that moment, for the first time in years, I wanted something real with someone. Not because I needed saving, but because for once, someone chose to stand beside me. In the days that followed, I couldn't stop thinking about his words. "I have an idea. If you want, we can make him realize what he lost." At first, I hesitated. It sounded childish, like something a bitter ex would do just to stir up more drama. But the more I remembered the things my ex had said, the coldness, the cruelty, the way he dumped me like I was nothing, the more I realized he had walked away without ever facing the consequences. And me? I was left shattered.
So yes.
I wanted him to feel it, not out of hate or spite, but because he needed to know that he hadn't broken me, that I got back up, that I was worth something. "What's the plan?" I asked, sitting beside him in his apartment one evening. He smiled slightly and said, "Lorena is obsessed with her image. She thrives on appearances. If she finds out he's only with her for her money, she'll walk away in a heartbeat." And how would she find out? He pulled out his phone and showed me pictures, interviews, event footage. She was definitely someone who moved in social circles, cared deeply about status. We won't need a public scandal. Just a quiet truth, delivered directly. A message. A recording. I paused. I actually still have one. A voice note from when he told me that at least now he'd have a real luxury lifestyle. He said being with her was an upgrade. Financially speaking. He nodded, satisfied. "Perfect. Let me handle the rest." Within 48 hours, he created a fake account. Nothing too obvious. It looked like a mutual friend from her circle. The message was polite, simple. Just a heads up. Then came the recording. Edited to sound clear, real, undeniable. And then silence. 3 days later, my ex messaged me. What the hell did you do? Lorena blocked me on everything. She dumped me. Said someone sent her a recording. Said I'm a gold digger. Was that you? I stared at the screen for a while, then typed. I just showed her who you really are. He tried calling.
Twice.
I didn't answer. 2 days after that, he showed up at the entrance of my building. He looked awful.
Pale.
Disheveled. Completely stripped of that fake charm he always carried. You ruined my life, he said, his voice trembling. No, I replied calmly. You ruined mine. I just held up a mirror. And I closed the door in his face. What followed was unexpected.
Peace.
But not just from the revenge. It was more than that. I started seeing my boss, this man who had stood by me quietly all along with new eyes. Not because of what he had done to my ex, but because of what he had done for me. He never pushed. He never rushed me. He respected every silence, every scar. He made space for me to just be. And in that space, I began to heal. One evening, we were doing something simple, washing dishes together after dinner, when he looked at me with that calm, steady gaze and said, "Can I ask you something?" "As long as it's not about who's doing the floors next," I joked. He laughed softly. "I want to be with you. Officially. No secrets. No confusion. I want you to be my girlfriend, Carla." I froze for a second, not from fear, but from something even deeper.
Hope.
"Are you sure?" I asked, my voice low. "I've been sure since the day you threw $150 at me," he said with a crooked smile. I blushed, laughing and burying my face in my hands. "Ugh, don't remind me." He disappeared into his room for a moment, then came back with a small box. I wanted to return something. Inside the box were $150, perfectly folded, and a small handwritten note. "You're worth far more than this. But still, I owe you this back." I couldn't help it. I laughed and then I got a little choked up, because it wasn't about the money.
It was about what it meant.
"I'll take the dollars," I said with a smile. "And I'll be your girlfriend." He pulled me into a hug, and for the first time in a long time there was no fear. No tension. No pretending. Just peace. Just truth. And I realized that real love doesn't always arrive like a fairy tale. Sometimes it starts in chaos, in confusion. But when it's real, you know. And for the first time in my life, I knew. I never expected to hear about him again. Not after everything that had happened. After Lorena dumped him, I assumed he would vanish from the map, crawl back into his hole, wounded pride and all. But sometimes life, or fate, has a way of serving justice more perfectly than we ever could. I found out through a mutual acquaintance. Someone who still followed both of us online and occasionally sent me gossip. The message was short, but the irony in it made me smirk without meaning to. "Did you see your ex? He's stuck in England. No money, no job, no way to come back. Karma, right?" I clicked the link out of curiosity. It wasn't a public scandal, not a viral headline, but it was something. A post in a group for Latin American expats in London. A man, abandoned by his partner, stranded abroad without resources, sleeping on a friend's couch, asking for help to return home. No valid visa. No work. No safety net. It was him. The same man who told me I wasn't enough. The one who left me for a wealthier woman. The one who looked me in the eye and said he was moving on to a real life. Now he was alone.
Broke. Stuck.
Powerless. Did I feel pity? No. Anger? Not even. What I felt was something far stronger. Indifference. And that's when I knew the revenge was complete. Because the best revenge isn't loud. It isn't dramatic. It's quiet. It's in the silence of knowing you've built a life so good that their fall doesn't affect you anymore. My life had changed. Completely. Him. The man from the bar, the one I once thought would be a mistake I'd never shake, was now the best thing that ever happened to me. And not just because he was kind or gentle, but because he saw me. We'd been together for 3 months. 3 honest, steady, joyful months. Not a fairy tale, but something real. He knew everything, my past, my pain, the damage my father caused. And never once did he make me feel small because of it. He never tried to fix me. He just stood beside me. Patient.
Steady.
Present. And that's what healed me. We had our own rhythm now. Lazy Sunday mornings. Dinners cooked together. Small trips, quiet laughter, inside jokes. He'd hold my hand without needing to say anything. And for the first time in my life, I felt safe. Not because I had to be strong, but because someone finally made room for my softness. Sometimes I'd watch him from across the room and think about how it all started. That night in the bar. The worst night of my life, and somehow, the one that changed everything. I was broken, lost, humiliated. And now, I was whole. My relationship with my uncles grew stronger too. After the birthday dinner, they reached out more, invited me to lunch, and even included him without hesitation. He's calm, my Aunt Paula said, smiling, but you can tell he looks at you with respect. That's what matters, my Uncle Marcos added. After all you've been through, you deserve someone who doesn't make you carry the world alone. My mom, she cried when I told her we were officially together. I just wanted you to be with someone who sees your worth, she said, holding my hands. Someone who makes you feel safe.
We were closer now. She and I.
We could talk about the past without pain. We even laughed about some of it. We were healing, both of us, in our own ways. And my father? He kept pretending. He sent texts now and then, things like, I don't want us to be distant, or I'll always be your father. But I didn't reply. Not out of spite, but because I didn't need to. I didn't need his approval. I didn't need closure. I had moved on. One night, we were sitting on his balcony, sharing a cheap bottle of wine and a blanket, the city lights sparkling in the distance. He looked at me and said, Do you ever think that maybe that night at the bar was exactly what needed to happen? I smiled. I think about that all the time. I went to the darkest place in my life and somehow found light. He squeezed my hand gently, kissed my forehead, and then whispered, All thanks to one bad night and $150. I laughed. The worst $150 I ever threw away and the best I ever got back. You're worth millions, he said, looking at me the same way he always did, like I mattered. And in that quiet moment, without a grand gesture or dramatic ending, I realized something simple but powerful. I survived. I rebuilt. And I was finally living. Not perfectly, but fully.
Loved.
Safe. And free.